This video lecture is for Chapter 1. The title of Chapter 1 is 10 Ways to Think About Writing, Metaphoric Musings for College Writing Students. So this is definitely for you. I myself have to do writing situations a couple times a week. And so it's helpful for me to learn more about writing and learn the tricks of writing and the tricks of the trade. And for you as a student, it has that same meaning for some of you. And for others, you just want to meet the requirement. So that's what we're here doing. She starts off by talking about how there are principles of writing and there are tips of writing. And if you follow these principles, then you'll be guaranteed to be effective as a writer. Well, I think we all know that that's not the case. And you can't really apply rules and principles to effective writing. Not all of it, anyway. She acknowledges that writing is hard. Has writing been hard for you? It definitely has been hard for me, and continues to be hard, only I have tools to get through it. So the point is, I don't think you're ever going to say that writing is easy or writing is fun. That's not really the goal. It can be those things, but you have to kind of plow through the rough parts of it sometimes, and there's really no getting out of that. But for example, in this class, we are going to be writing essays to persuade, or just to present an argument and then leave that up to the reader whether they are persuaded. Here are some of the rules that she lists tongue-in-cheek. Always have a thesis. I before E except after C. No one-sentence paragraphs. Use concrete nouns. A semicolon joins to complete sentences. Now they go on and on and on, and she's got all the things that you would hear in a typical English class, and that you do hear still, and you should hear. But what she's talking about is going beyond those into respecting your audience enough to understand what they need to hear and what prior knowledge, the things that that audience knows, what prior knowledge do you need to bring in and relate to your argument. Next, she talks about the little green ball. And this is another case where you really have to understand your audience more so than just follow the rules of English. She calls this part of the chapter the little green ball and some people doing details right. She makes the point that it's quite impossible to read our spouse's mind. In my case, I'm married, so that rings a bell with me. And our incapacity to read anyone's mind who might be reading our essay. So the way we get around that is we have to research their mind and understand what are the things that keep them together as a person. Let's say they were raised by a single mother and the father wasn't around. So later on, they have learned to put very little trust in anything just because it's a father example. For example, I am the father of California. I am taking care of California as California's governor. Now, I'm not talking about the current governor. I'm just making an example. To this person, that might not be a very attractive trait because they never had a father, or their father was abusive possibly. So it's actually going to work against them to continue stating that they are the father of California. So by changing that around to something that they might appreciate, they might say, I am the parent who is watching over California. Something like that might be better. Even that's not really the best one, but you get the idea. think about your audience and the things they share in common. You'll never think of every aspect. You'll never get every aspect as common to all your audience, but you'll get closer. It's been said that if you aim at nothing, pretend you have a dartboard, you will for sure hit nothing. But if you aim at something, you'll get closer than if you aim at nothing. So aim at something with your audience. Try to figure out what general type are they. She gives a great example, and if you haven't read it carefully, I recommend you go back and read it again carefully. And it is called Lost Money and Thank You Notes. Make sure you read that, and we'll be talking about that in our discussion. But in it, she talks about how, if you can imagine, she places it in the setting of imagining that you've run out of money and you can't pay for your rent, you can't pay for water, you can't pay for food. Now, since this is a high school class, you're probably not paying those things yet. If you are, kudos to you, good for you, but it's not really time yet. You can wait till you're grown a little more. But if you imagine yourself in high school, let's say you get a really bad grade that you didn't mean to get, okay? So who are you going to tell this to and how? Will you go to your parents and you say, I don't care about that stupid school. They gave me another bad grade. I don't care. Is that going to be effective? Probably wouldn't be effective in my house, but maybe the parents have a bone to pick with school, and that would be okay to say. You see the difference there? Think about your audience. Maybe it's a friend, and the friend just wants you to hang out and not worry about it. Maybe they want you to go dune buggy racing, and you got their dune buggies. Even out in COVID, they're going out there riding their dune buggies. Let's go ride the dune buggy. I don't care. And how would you tell them? You know, I'm really frustrated about that. Maybe you'd say a bad word. Who knows about that school? They gave me another bad grade. Okay, so that would be your frustration. Then how would you relay that to your friend? That's what she talks about there. I find it very, very interesting. Please check that out before you do that. In the next section, she talks about keeping your audience with you. Don't just introduce it for them, but then keep them with you and don't let them go, because you're trying to convince of an argument. You're trying to convince of a point of view, so you don't want to lose them along the way. She gives a great example of driving in a car, knowing something's coming up ahead, and saying, get ready, guys, because something special is coming up ahead on the right side of the road. And it's a monument, and it's wonderful, and you should see it while we drive by. You're not going to go, hey, look right there, we just passed it. Oh my gosh, monument back there. Come on, check it out, guys. See the difference? So are you preparing them in the forward and then guiding them through, relating it with them? Or are you just basically saying something like, the death penalty's wrong. They've proved it in the past. See the connection there, how that's a bad idea? So this all falls under the category that we're talking about in chapter 1, which is considering your audience. I am a guitar player. Over there, up there. Also bass player, also piano player. Anything I can get my hands on, I love to learn it. But anyway, I wanted to just relate another example about audience. I used to take my guitar out of my 4th grade classroom where I taught in a K-5 environment, taught 4th grade mostly, but different grades in K-5 for 20 years. That's what I did before I came here to teach college. And my specialty was always English, and I have my master's in English. My degree in English is actually formulated by Cal State Fullerton to help students get into the community college as teachers. So it's a long time coming. I got that degree in 98, I want to say, 98 I think, or 2000, one or the other. I got my teaching credential one, and I forget when I got each, but 98, let's say. I got my 98 MA. In fact, it's right behind me right there. Pretty proud of it. But when I got that, I was teaching little guys because that's the job that opened up to me. So sometimes people would call me in and they say, hey, we like your guitar. Can you come to kindergarten? Well, I would sing This Land Is Your Land to my fourth graders because they could remember all the words. In fact, they liked the words, so I would put them on a big sheet of paper and we would read all the words to This Land Is Your Land. But when I'd go to kindergarten, we'd sing this song, the vowel song. Have you ever heard of it? The vowel song? We just go, I like to eat my apples and bananas, and then we change the value to A. A like to eat my apples and bananas, and you get the idea. We go through the vowels, and the kids loved it. Now, the kids in fourth would laugh at that too, but it wasn't the most entrancing to tame the savage beast, so to speak, in the class. It wouldn't really calm everybody down. It'd get everybody more crazy because it's too easy for them. They know the vowels. But in kinder, boy, they just stared the whole time. They thought it was so funny that the teacher was saying, "Elik to eat me eeples and beaninis," and stuff like that. So it's just a different audience. And you sometimes have to choose a different song. You have to choose a different song. Now, how can you apply that into what you're saying? We're going to talk about the death penalty in here. We're going to talk about abortion in here. We're going to talk about all the hot topics. We're going to talk about the government in here a little bit, not too much, because there's an election going on and I don't want any fistfights. But what I can do as your 104 teacher is I can help you formulate your thesis so it's provable. And it is possible for me to do that for someone's argument and give it back to them and not even agree with it. But there are certain things that I have to agree with, and they're called facts. And that's what we'll integrate into our writing. But more important than facts, even, I would say, is the idea of knowing your audience. And I call it outlining your audience. She doesn't use that term, but we'll go ahead and say that in here a lot. You say, "Hey, Professor Riley, I got this idea. I want to do this paper. Have you outlined your audience? Who is your audience?" And that would be the main way that I would actually, I hate to say it because everybody gets nervous, but that'd be the way that I would kind of grade you holistically. Obviously, there's things like punctuation, grammar, things like that. And using the MLA format and all the things that we'll put in your rubric, that will tell you exactly what I'm looking for. But then overall, there's going to be a section on the rubric that's going to be, did they analyze their audience? Is it a cohesive audience? Does everything make sense to a certain audience? Here's a story from my youth I'll share with you. I took English 104 years back when I was at a community college called Saddleback Community College. It's in a city of Mission Viejo, down south by San Clemente, South Orange County. The Swallows of San Juan Capistrano, literally next to San Juan Capistrano, was my high school and my college, Saddleback College. And when I was there, I took English 104, the equivalent. I don't think it was called 104, but it was critical thinking, logic. And when I took logic, we had to look at things for what they were logically, not emotionally. And so my professor would find out who wanted to be pro-abortion, for example, whatever the topic was that we were doing a paper on. Whoever was pro, he was a really good teacher too, by the way. This is an awesome method. I'm not going to do it exactly like him, but I do think of it when I'm talking to you guys about your papers and such. But he said everybody who is what did they call they call that pro-life. They have different names for it, so I don't want to inflame anybody, but here's pro-life over here. So he got have everybody get up. It was a lot. It was like half the class. I was actually, at that time, I considered myself pro-life. I was a single guy. What I don't know why I even had a position on it. Didn't have a girlfriend at all. Was not sexually active. Okay, there, I'll say it. So it just wasn't really up my alley to even know about it. But I definitely, because of my church and things at the time, I felt like I needed to be pro-life. So I got up with those people, went over to this side. Then he said, now if you're pro-choice, then you come over here on this side. So then everybody came over on the other side, and then there were some people left that were different. He says, you guys got to choose a sides for this because this is just a two-sided essay that we're going to do. So they kind of trickled off to different sides, and he had us both at different sides, and then he surprised us with the bomb. He said, okay, now all you guys that are pro-life over here, you're going to be writing your paper from the opposite position. And you people over here that are pro choice, you're going to be writing your paper like you're defending pro life. It was one of the hardest things I've ever done. It didn't change my mind. And I'm not going to be telling you a whole lot of my own mind in this class because I don't think it's relevant. But I will tell you I am pro choice now. On that one I will tell you. And it wasn't because of that necessarily. It was just because of living my life. You know, I'm now married with 3 children. I'm 51 years old instead of 20 years old when that happened. So I've lived a number of years, and you guys don't have that ability because you're still young, but being young is cool. Don't worry, we're going to use a lot of the youth and the excitement in your essays. But think of that. Think if you had to take the opposite point of view. I suppose if it was really difficult for me to get my students to think about the other side, then I might do that. I might surprise them and make them do that. But last semester, we did a lot of persuasive writing and argumentative writing in my 101. And I found that a lot of my students didn't have a problem with the other side that much. They could actually imagine what the audience might be thinking. So we won't be doing it that drastically, but when you are writing, I do expect you to remember my story and remember what if you had to get up and you had to be the other side and you had to convince people to come to the other side. That's what we had to do. The next thing she writes about is the plain jello, and I just love that example. If you think about the fact that you're going to try and have people over to your house, you want to give them a dessert, are you going to give them plain jello and then say, here's the main course too, plain jello, and on and on and on? No, you're not going to do that. You're going to probably dress it up, make it red. I love red jello. I love red punch. I love fruit punch. I love anything citrusy. This is that stuff, vitamin C packets that you put in your water, because right now with COVID and everything, none of us can be too careful. So I'm always drinking vitamin C. That's delicious, okay? So you might mix it up, maybe with some orange juice, maybe orange jello, other things, because you want to keep people interested. When you're always just throwing your own opinions out, boom, 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 like that to people, and I have to say, I mean, social media is a great example of where people do that, including me. But I'm learning to do it less and less because if you think about it, who is more important to who you're writing to? The people who agree with you or the people who don't? I would say the people who don't, because the people who are agreeing with you, they'll give you a like. They give you that little cares thing they have on Facebook now. I don't even know if you guys are on Facebook because it's actually more for an older crowd, is what I hear. You're moving on to things like Snapchat and Instagram and such. So the point is, on any of these things, think about the person that disagrees with you. It's something to think about. I do disagree with one point that she makes about paragraph length. She doesn't think that there are any rules that you can set forth to make standard paragraphs. I disagree with that, probably because I was a 4th grade teacher for so long. I want to give you some clear, guidelines so you know you've done things right, as well as some wide open things where I want you to go ahead and just run off and do your own thing. I like that. That's what I want. And I think my students last semester class, they, I just realized this is 104, and I'm talking about the students from 101. You are those students. I'm also at another high school, and so they're going to get a different message for 101, but you guys are 104. So you remember, you're probably remembering a lot of these things that we've already talked about, because remember I told you this is a 101 last year, and then some of you are new too. So if you're new, perfect. This is just for you as well. But yeah, think about the things we talked about considering the other person in your writing, because to me, that's what it is all about. I remember when I first started college, my dad would say, he's a great dad. He still is a great dad. He'd say, you're a communicator. You've always been a communicator. And that made me feel very special, made me feel very good. I try and live up to that. I'm a communicator. I'm not a shouter. I'm not a ridiculer, although sometimes I fail and I do ridicule without meaning to. But what I am is a communicator, and I want you to be communicators as well. And I want people to notice that. You can start with one thing, considering the other. You got me. Everybody knows me. We got C3PO back there from Star Wars. He's a robot. But let's think about other. The other. Okay, you want to talk about piano music? Why it's your favorite thing? Think about the other. Think about the people that maybe are sick of piano music or don't care about it or have never seen it before. You're going to weave all that in, see? But if making a paragraph shorter or making one sentence right in the middle of the page in between paragraphs, if you feel that that will adjust them, if that tool is being used to adjust the other, your audience, to adjust their understanding to where you're coming from, that's a good thing. But if you're saying, I don't know what else to say on this topic, so I'm going to make it a short paragraph, that's not good. Okay? Think about your paragraphs before you write them. And it should be very clear what you're trying to do if it's just a sentence. And that should be few and far between. And that's kind of what she's saying here. Okay, number 8 that she talks about is very, very important. So please go back and read it if you haven't. Remind yourself of this one. It's only a page or two, I think. 2 or 3 pages, tops. And she talks about how you need to annotate what you read. Now, if you've been on Zoom, and we will do some Zoom for sure, but we haven't done it yet. But if you've done Zoom, then you know that there's that ability to annotate on the screen if the instructor lets you do that. You can annotate on the screen and write things down. But this is even more than that. This is when you're reading the text. I'm giving you a free text. I hope you like that. It's called an OER, Open Education Resource. And that just means people have created it and they've put it out there. And we're allowed to change it and say we've changed it and add to it. And it's called Open Resource, open source. Some of you may have heard before. WordPress, if you blog, you know WordPress is like the #1 blogging platform. It's open source, which means people can submit ideas to it, and it's always evolving and always updating. Open source is part of our world right now. So I have selected an open source PDF that you guys don't have to pay for, and you can keep. Just make sure you download it before the class is over. So she says kind of humorously that this is an essay, this is a book about writing, but you also need to read. You need to be a reader when you're writing something. You can't just be throwing constantly stuff out that you're regurgitating from the Reagan years or whatever. I mean, you need to be reading stuff now. It helps if you read academic things. The news is iffy. Right now there's a lot of anger in the news about the president and the election that's coming up. So it's possible you're going to get some stuff that's slanted this way and some stuff that's slanted that way, but you can't really help it because there's nothing academic really written on it yet. There will be, trust me. But for now, as you're reading your textbook that I've provided for you, make notes on it. Do you know how to annotate on a PDF? Do you know how to highlight on a PDF? This is a good idea, and I'll tell you why. When it comes time to write your paper, I think I'm giving you about 3 weeks before we turn on our first paper. But you can start thinking of it now and annotating it and highlighting it. So you might 2 weeks from now go in there to write your paper and you look for sources. Boom, they're all there because you annotated them. So I recommend finding the ways to highlight in PDFs and then save it. You can also print it up if you're old school or you just like that. I hate that how if you do anything that the way they used to do it, they call you old school. So that doesn't necessarily mean you're old school, but I am old school. So some stuff I like to print up and I'll highlight, but other stuff like doing this essay, I just have it right in front of me as a computer and I don't need the paper form. So it's up to you. Just be honest with yourself what you need. Also, she brings up a great point, very elucidating point. She says when you interact with the text, you talk back to it. And when you do that, you make it your own. So obviously, she's not talking about actually physically talking back to the text. She's talking about making a highlight making a highlight, circling, making an arrow to something else, all that, you're making it your own. And you could do that on the PDF form, or you could print it up and do it that way. You don't have to print up the whole thing too. I think it's like 1,000 pages or something. It is 366 pages. I was way off, but still, come on. Do you really want, during COVID, you want to have to waste all that paper, so you have to get more paper? No. 9 was interesting. I want you to read that for yourself. I don't really feel that she says use your higher brain. That's something that maybe we can talk about in the discussion, but make sure you do read it. Okay, I want to thank you for coming along this journey with me in the text. And this marks the end of chapter 1. Our next journey will be into chapter 2. Make sure you go and write your answer to the discussion questions next on the modules.